Now before the festival of Passover, Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart from this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were here in the world, he loved them to the end. The devil had already put into the heart of Judas, son of Simon Iscariot, to betray him. And during supper, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going to God, got up from the table, took off his outer robe, and tied a towel around himself. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel that was tied around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus answered,
"You do not know now what I am doing, but later you will understand."
Peter said to him, "You will never wash my feet." And Jesus answered, "Unless I wash you, you have no share with me." Simon Peter said to him, "Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head." And Jesus said to him,
"One who has bathed does not need to wash, except for the feet, but is entirely clean, and you are clean, though not all of you."
For he knew who was to betray him. And for this reason he said,
"Not all of you are clean."
After he had washed their feet, had put on his robe, and had returned to the table, he said to them,
"Do you know what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for that is what I am. So if I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have set you an example, that you should do as I have done to you. Very truly I tell you, servants are not greater than their master, nor messengers greater than the one who sent them. If you know these things, you are blessed if you do them."
And Jesus said,
"Now the Son of Man has been glorified, and God has been glorified in him. If God has been glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself, and will glorify him at once. Little children, I am only with you for a little longer. You will look for me as I said to the Jews, so now I say to you, where I am going, you cannot come. I give you a new commandment, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you should also love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love one for another." This is the gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ.
Thanks be to God.
Foot washing. Ugh. Embarrassing, awkward, a little strange, and for most of the faithful, blessedly optional. So why are we doing this again? I mean, wasn't Broadway just fine without a foot washing service for over 120 years? And then once we did start doing it, we haven't done it every year since. So why bother? Do this in remembrance of me. Some liturgical traditions have decided that all of the events of that evening should be covered by this mandate. So on just this one worship date each year, this Maundy Thursday, we expand our remembrance beyond the bread and the cup to also include the towel and the basin. Besides, the very word Maundy has become synonymous with foot washing. So if we are going to have a Maundy Thursday service, Even for us quasi-liturgical, quasi-Baptists, Maundy Thursday without a foot washing would be strange indeed. It is only in John's Gospel that we find Jesus washing feet that night. Matthew, Mark, and Luke don't mention it. But then John is not one to fall in line with the other synoptic Gospels anyway. If you'll remember, it's John's Gospel where Jesus isn't baptized. There's no institution of communion, no agonizing prayer in Gethsemane with sleepy apostles. And when it comes time for Jesus' end on the cross, John's Jesus doesn't even die. Matthew, Mark, and Luke all tell us that Jesus took his last breath. But in John, Jesus bows his head and gives up his spirit. John's Jesus was always in control. As William Brodson puts it, at every moment of his trial, torture, and execution, Jesus remains ironically in charge. So much so that in the fourth gospel, Jesus does not even die, but declares that his work is completed, bows his head, and gives up his spirit. No one could take his spirit or life from him, but rather he gives up his own spirit, a spirit that the Father would then turn around and give back to us all. So only in John do we have Jesus bending to wash the feet. Jesus took control of the situation. Jesus controlled the narrative. And with Jesus in control, he put the focus on humble service. The other Gospels have Jesus serving by feeding and healing and exorcising demons, but here we have Jesus stripping down, kneeling, and washing with his own hands. And he didn't wash their heads, which would have been easier, more dignified. Rather, he lowered himself to the ground and washed their dirty feet. As Jeremy Taylor wrote of Jesus over 350 years ago, and he chose to wash their feet rather than their head, that he might have the opportunity of a more humble posture and a more apt signification of his charity. Thus God lays everything aside that he may serve his servants. Heaven stoops to earth, and one abyss calls upon another, and the miseries of humanity, which next to the infinite, are excelled by a mercy equal to the immensity of God. Jesus, the Messiah, stripped off his robe, wrapped himself in a towel, lowered himself to the ground, and washed their dirty feet. When he was finished, he asked, "Do you know what I have done for you?" And in a rare moment of wisdom and discretion that was indeed rare for the disciples, they didn't answer. Usually quick to answer by putting their feet in their mouth, tonight they seem to be figuring out that Jesus asks tricky questions. And if they don't answer, then maybe he'll answer for them. Do you know what I have done for you? Do you know what Jesus has done for us? If not, then how are we supposed to imitate him? How can we follow Jesus' directive to do as I have done if we don't know what it was? Do you know what I have done for you? The answer to this question doesn't start on the cross. The answer starts in the manger and in the baptismal waters, in the teaching and the healing, in breaking down barriers by talking to the woman at the well, in welcoming the children, in tossing over the tables and clearing the temple, in crying at Jesus' death, at Lazarus' death, in the body and in the blood, in the basin and in the towel, in the life and the death. Do we know what Jesus has done for us? Scripture said that Jesus knows that the Father has given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was about to go back to God. And he knew that the one who would betray him had already made up his mind. At that moment, knowing what he knew, he chose to humble himself and to serve. But this service was not from a place of weakness, but rather from a place of power. Again, the words of William Brosand. So Jesus got up from the table, literally arose, the same Greek word used in John 5 to describe Jesus' command to the paralytic, and in John 2 to foretell Jesus' own rising. The term that Luke uses in the Passion predictions and the Easter account to describe Jesus' resurrection. This getting up from the table, taking the basin and the towel, was not an act of weakness, but an act of powerful and empowering service on the night of the betrayal, nothing less than a foretaste of the resurrection. His service was symbolic, but it was also practical. He washed their dirty feet because no one else had. If we are to imitate his service, we must find practical things that need to be done, and we must humble ourselves enough to do them. Sometimes it's awkward and uncomfortable, and it might be a little hard to get down on the floor and even harder to get back up. But that's what we do because that's what Jesus did. It's only in a posture of humility and service that we let go of our own pride and arrogance and abuse of power enough that we can actually learn from other people. If we never let go of that pride, then we assume that we know the best, and there's nothing that we can learn from others. As I started by saying tonight, our foot washing is blessedly optional. But if we can't bring ourselves to bare our own feet and bend down and pour water over someone else's feet in this antiseptic and symbolic setting, how are we going to do it in real life? If we can't humble ourselves here in God's house where all are supposed to be accepted, how are we going to humble ourselves out in the world where our real defenses are up? How will we ever do what must be done out there to show true love and humility? And that service that we do, those actions that we need to do to wash the feet of others, what do they look like? Is it serving at the agape meal, or going on mission trips, or working in the mobile food pantry, or caring for babies in the nursery, or preparing communion elements, perhaps volunteering in hospitals? Well, yes, it is all those things. But more importantly, it's how we do everything that we do. The way that we hold a door, the way that we treat a cashier, the way we preach a sermon, the way that we read to a child, the way that we write a note, the way that we love each other. The way that we do everything should be influenced by the spirit of washing another's feet. We preach so many more sermons every day with our actions than we ever do with our words. As often as you eat this bread and drink the cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until He comes. As often as we stumble and shuffle our way to the basin and towel, we proclaim the power of loving service, a sure and foretaste of what it means to love each other, as the bread and the cup are a foretaste of heaven. Little children, I'm only with you a little longer. You will look for me as I said to the Jews, now I say to you, where I am going you cannot come, but I give you a new commandment, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you should also love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. They will know we are Christian by the beliefs that we have. No. They will know we are Christian by the signs that we carry or that we stick on our cars. No. They will know we are Christian by how much we come to church. No. They will know we are Christian by our love. They will know we are Christian by our love. They will know we are Christian by our love.